reporting and analysis in real time. And so the theme of this meeting today is we're looking at technologies that are powering the clinical research and education fields in healthcare. So welcome CliniOps. I have Avik.
Hello everybody, good evening, and thank you for your time here. I'm Avik Pal, founder and CEO of CliniOps, and I'm an engineer by profession, so I feel privileged to be in the company of doctors. So we have developed a product that supports clinical trials, global clinical trials. I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges that's faced currently and some of the use cases that some of you may or may not relate. It's typically targeted for pharma, biotech, med devices. They run trials, clinical trials. But we are doing a lot of work also with foundations, academia, and global health. So, so basically the goal is, there's a heavy trail, a paper trail right now. No matter how advanced you are in use of technology, there's a lot of paper trails. And that slows down the process, right? Typically, a clinical trial, a global phase 3 clinical trial, takes about 15 years to bring a new drug to market and costs about $2 billion on an average. So one of the big reasons for that is a lot of manual intervention along the way, a lot of paper dependencies, and very minimal automation, streamlining. So that's one of the areas that is our main focus. And there are three target areas. One is conducting the trial, which is mainly pharma, the sponsor. The other one is managing the trial. These are all at different sites. Sites are nothing but hospitals, health centers. And then finally, patient engagement. That's the third component. So we have a product in each area. Oops. How does this work? So that was, maybe scroll up a little bit.
Doesn't go up?
Okay. Okay. So, I'm Avik Pal and Subbu, co-founder. And we both come from technology background, went to college together at IIT back in India, did our MBAs here, worked in the software industry for a while. But I worked a lot on the pharma and healthcare side. Subbu did a lot of work on gene sequencing, medical devices. And then we came together and started CliniOps. We have three prominent advisors. Hugh is a pretty thought leader in the space. I mean, he was senior vice president at Quintiles. That's the biggest company running clinical trials. He was also the vice president at Medidata, which is one of the biggest EDC systems. EDC is the counterpart of EMR in life sciences. Pat is a doctor, and she brings all the physician-related workflows into our product development. And Arjun Malhotra recently joined our board. He was founder of HCL, which is a $17 billion global company with a big focus in life sciences. So that's the bottom part. So since we launched our product, we received several traction along the way. Frost & Sullivan recently published us as among the premier player in the technology space. And then last year we received a top 10 innovation award from PharmaVoice, which is the biggest platform. So what is eSource, right? That's the area where we focus. What's eSource? So according to FDA, the first point of entry of patient data is source data. Now, if that point of entry happens on a piece of paper, prescription, or a document, that becomes a source document. And there's a lot of downstream liabilities that comes with it. You have to store that in a GCP-compliant archival system for 7 years and all that stuff. If that first point of entry happens electronically, that's what eSource is, right? So that source data can come from various sources, lab management system, medical devices, EMRs, medical imaging, whole bunch of places. They eventually come to one central location, right? Right now, that's maybe you can squeeze this, maybe. No, zoom in, like something. yeah, something like that, yeah. A little better. So yeah, if it comes through, a paper as first point of entry, that becomes a source and eventually comes to a database. But if there's a way we can kind of eliminate that, it can go straight to an eSource, right? What are the benefits? E-sourcing of data makes it paperless, brings a lot of automation in play. You can do a lot of analytics real time, right? It improves monitoring functions. So monitoring, I don't know if monitoring plays a big role in this whole clinical trial, and it's actually 30 to 40% of the total budget goes just in monitoring. It says it's called source data verification, SDV. So what happens is when these different hospitals around the world collect data, and typically a phase 3 can have 50 to 100 sites globally. So each site collects a lot of PHI data, protected health information, my first name, last name, date of birth, phone number. These data are non-clinical data, PHI data, and Novartis or a Pfizer who is sponsoring this study does not own it. Right? It's the property of the site. So what happens when you collect all this data in paper, you just can't scan and send it because the PHI goes with it. So scrubbing that PHI and having another set of document which can be scanned, it's a big process, very difficult to manage. Typically, monitors fly down to the site. So within the premises, you can see that data. Right? So they evaluate whether the paper data and the electronic data match or not, right? And then they go back. So that's basically a lot of manual travel, non-productive work involved in monitoring. This can be streamlined in a big way. And finally, patient engagement. Informed consent, right? Every patient has to sign those digital informed consent. Can you digitize it, right? Alerts, notifications, a whole bunch of other things around patient engagement. So that's our third focus as I was talking about initially. Some of these things I mentioned, back in the days, 80s, it was all Excel, paper. Fast forward, mid-90s, EDCs came to the market. EDC, as I said, is counterpart of EMR in health and life sciences. Did a drastic improvement, but guess what? The impact wasn't that big enough. Trials still take 15 years, still cost $2 billion. Why so? Right? So when you run these global trials, about typically, depending on oncology, heavily lopsided in the US, but infectious disease, heavily lopsided on the emerging world. But there's a big part of trial sites which are global, emerging world, and right? More so because unless you get that heterogeneous mix of subject population from around the world, the drug is not that effective. FDA also kind of enforces that if you're doing a diabetes trial of 1,000 patients, you just can't take 1,000 patients from San Francisco and get done. It doesn't really work. So they have to go global, right? So global nature doesn't go away. Now guess what? A lot of these places where these trials run, point of care internet is a big challenge. So that source document happens on paper. Internet is a big challenge. Physicians' familiarity with computers is a big challenge. EMR knowledge is a big challenge. Nurses' willingness to enter data in a technical way, electronic way is a challenge. So all those put together, paper is the fallback. So you have 100 sites. Let's say 20 of them are Stanford and Hopkins and Sloan Kettering and all that. They are getting your data like that. You have these other 80 sites. Some of them are getting your data 90 days later, which is typical. 6 to 12 weeks normally. From the patient came in to the data availability is 6 to 12 weeks. So that slows down the process. So why so? Because those still continue to collect on paper first and then go to some ED system. So unless that last data from that last performing site comes in, database is not locked, right? And hence the delay. So how can we change that? So that's basically, so FDA actually recently launched something called eSource guidelines. And we use that as a Bible to develop our product. And basically, the intent is that we can transform how the clinical trials would be conducted going forward. Challenges, I think, kind of obvious, I mentioned along the way, but there's challenges on the pharma side. Source data verification, a lot of travel, quality of data, availability of data. And on the sites, it's a lot of paper dependency, manual processes, a lot of queries, which is the data quality. And then eventually dependency on network if you're supposed to use some of these EDC systems. This is what we do, right? So if you look at the top, so once the data, the study is configured on the technology platform, typically they take paper printouts of that form It's called PCRF, paper case report form. So data is initially, this is the traditional EDC flow. So data is first collected on paper. It's actually stored in source, and these source documents are stored in storages, cupboards, you'll see, for several months, weeks, years. And then somebody comes and transcribes the data from that paper into an EDC system. Then somebody comes, flies all the way to monitor and say, okay, blood pressure 720 on paper, on the eClinical platform 720 tick mark, it's good. So it moves on, right? So for that, there's a lot of travel, and it's just a simple example. Finally, data management. About 6-12 weeks later, they're looking at 720 for blood pressure. It's too high. Generate a query. That's 12 weeks later. That query comes back to that hospital in China, in India, in Brazil, wherever. And they are looking, scrambling, what happened? What was the actual data point? How do I know, right? So they go back to the source documents, open the covers, look for files, and take out and figure out. So it's a lengthy process, right? So what we're trying to do is after you configure it, all these sites will be enabled with a tablet. Okay? These tablets need to be online for the first time. Okay? Typically, every single site that qualifies for a clinical trial, that's a basic requirement. Electronic, EDC system, electronic data collection. So it's a requirement. The challenge is point of care, right? So it has a network in the other side of the aisle, right? Server room or network zone or something like that. So the iPads or the tablets need to be online for the first time, where it's pushed. Our configuration is pushed there. After that, it can go completely offline. So now the physician can take that iPad and can go bed to bed, room to room, floor to floor, or remote if it's a village or something, to a pregnant woman who cannot, you can do anything, completely offline. Now, all the data is collected offline on the tablet, right? And guess what? You enter 720 blood pressure, it pops up offline. Hey, this is out of range, please fix. Fix it right there, right? Second, since they are all collected digitally, nothing needs to be stored. Third, there's no idle time, or very minimal. From 6 to 12 weeks, we brought it down to 6 to 12 hours. So you're fully functional throughout the day. Before you go back home at the end of the day, you go to a Wi-Fi zone and sync the data, right? So idle time is a lot less. Transcription, manual transcription, completely eliminated, right? Data monitoring. So since it's all electronic, we uncheck the PHI, the first name, last name, date of birth, phone number, email, uncheck. Rest all goes up, synced, right? So you don't need to travel all the way to just ensure that the data was entered correctly. And it's not 6 to 12 weeks later, it's near real time. And finally, data management. So you still do data management, but there's about 80% reduction in queries because data is cleansed at the very beginning, front-loaded, right? So then finally, we export it in CDISC standards, which is international data standards, into an analytics platform like SAS, like SPSS, and others. And the goal is, if we do this right, if we configure it right, if we put all the logic and rules engines in place, then we should be very quickly able to get to analytics and eliminate a big part of all the interim processes along the way. Now, I'm not saying it will be completely eliminated, but drastically reduced. Right? It increases quality, it's the biggest benefit, and obviously along the way it saves time and money. So the drug can get to patients much faster. Instead of 15 years, hopefully we can bring it down much faster. How do we do it? So we have a portal, web portal, where all these configurations are done. It goes into the iPads or the tablets where all the data is collected, and deliberately so that data is collected only at the sites. It's not entered through the portal at a pharma or at a biotech. And we also have a ePro mechanism where patients with their smartphones can be communicated for alerts, reminders. They can even generate data. How do you feel today? Scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain level? They can do things like that. And eventually, all the data comes to a single platform where you can see, trends, charts, graphs. So these things never existed, 6, 12 weeks later. So basically, real-time analytics doesn't really exist right now. till eSource was started, FDA started promoting and Translate started promoting eSource. It's just a way of showing that the tablets collect data from the hospitals, the patients collect data from the smartphones, they all come back to the same portal where the sponsors or the pharma company have access to. Benefits, I think, hopefully obvious, and if it's not, then I have not done a good job. Moving on, just a couple of use cases, let's say. So Harvard was one of our first customer. They were running a trial on psychiatric disease. One of their site was Mass Gen Hospital. Two of their sites were in Ethiopia and Somaliland. Okay, why so? I don't know. But the researchers like Avik, we are getting data from Mass Gen in 2 days. But we're getting data from Ethiopia after 90 days, 90. And that's typically normal, I said, okay, 6 to 12 weeks. Okay, that's on the other side. Now, we took 2 case report forms from him, configured them in our iPads, gave it to 2 of his colleagues who was flying to Ethiopia the following week, a couple of weeks later. After it reached, I flew back to Boston. So he put me on a phone with a nurse who was collecting the data. So I gave her a username and password and said, well, collect the data. Once you enter, you'll see 2 forms that you're very familiar with because you've been doing it on paper. Enter the data directly. Go to your network zone, sync the data, and just ping us. Done, right? And we were sitting. So 10 minutes later, the ping came. I said, wow, that's cool. And I let the professor log into the system, CliniOps.harvard.com. So he sees informed consent. That has the patient's signature, but redacted because it's a PHI. And that has the nurse's signature, which is visible. And it has the system timestamp. It has the geolocation, says Addis Ababa University. So it's very authentic, right? He moves on. He sees the 2 forms, sees all the data, no mistake, and literally jumped up from the chair. Avik, what you did in 10 minutes takes us 90 days. Right? So the other one example I just want to highlight is it's on lymphatic filariasis. It happens in island countries, funded by Gates Foundation and 3 pharma companies. Right now, we're running in 6 countries. It's about 38,000 patients. We are close to 20,000 patients now, and by next year, June, when the study ends, well, hopefully that's the goal. Some of the areas, Papua New Guinea, 37 kbps. So what it means is very, very low bandwidth, very, very resource poor settings, hardly any technology will work. Well, we figured out a way to collect data even in those regions completely offline at a very low bandwidth, sync the data so it's visible to Gates Foundation and others on the other side in Seattle. Right? So most of these places are rural villages and very, very resource poor settings. But anyway, we've been able to make them work. So with that, and these are some of the some of the countries that we're already there. Several ones. I was at Stanford this morning. 6, 7 countries new starting up. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the focus is to ensure that if you fix the last mile problem, that the last data from that last site coming almost at par with the best data from the best site, things will improve. So thank you very much for your time. Any questions? Please.
So whatever automation we do, right, given the complexity of clinical trials today, there will always be some issues in terms of the data that comes back to the sponsors from the sites, right, so in terms of whatever, patient data. So does this platform also enable the collaboration between the sponsors on the sites so as to resolve the queries on time?
Yes, absolutely. Good question. So basically, that's called query resolution, right? So I don't know if you've followed. I said that queries have reduced by 80%. So that's the collaborative platform. So once you see 720 as blood pressure, the investigator on the other side can generate a query through our platform, and it shows up as a notification on the tablet on the other side of the globe. So we do support that. That's a very integral part of data quality management.
So what's the business model?
So it's a SaaS-based model. Per trial we can do. We are also looking at enterprise models where, for example, Novartis supports, I think, does 256 trials a year. So you can support at that scale, or let's say smaller trials with small pharma. So we do offer a per trial basis. If you want to use it for a single trial, you can support that. Please.
Who are you targeting?
Yes, yes. Big pharma, big biotechs, medical device companies. We just did one with a local Bay Area medical device company for their 510(k) submission. But we are also doing a lot of work with academia and foundations in a global scale.
Great presentation. I may have missed it. What's the innovation with EMRs?
So that's a very billion-dollar question. So unlike the life sciences side, where CDISC has done a lot of standardization on the data, International Data Exchange Consortium, the EMR side, HL7.3, so they're still struggling. So if you look at an Epic or a Cerner, their data outputs are very different. If you look at just an Epic, 5 implementations are very different. If you look at even one of those, 10 doctors are using it differently. So that level of standardization is not there yet. So right now we're working with Harvard on one of the initiatives on Gyno OB, where there is an interface with an Epic, but those are all case-by-case basis, one-on-one integration. But the eventual goal is to go at a higher level, at a standards level. So CDISC is on one side, but we're hoping that the EMR side will evolve very soon. There was a
Before you sync that you drop tablets damage, how do you recover the data?
excellent question. Get it all the time. So if not tablet, paper, right? You spill a coffee, what do you do? So FDA has some some ways to take care of those, right? So they have some recommendations. As long as you follow those guidelines, you're good, right? So there is backup, there is recovery, there is HIPAA, there is 21 CFR 11 compliance. So all those are built into our application. That takes care of.
Do you envision an application for post-marketing surveillance?
Yes, very much. Yes, PMS studies, we do support them as well.
How are you going to protect your idea from being copied?
I'm here to spread my idea. We have a patent filed. So ideas are diamond as it's on the execution. So yes, please.
I saw that the final component of your solution has something to do with analytics, right? Could you describe what types of analytics that you have already pre-built? And if there are a lot of different things that you can do, clinical trial operations monitoring, the adverse events, and so on and so forth, right? So what are some standard things that you've already built, and can it be customized to add a few more things?
Right. I wish I could say a lot more about it. We are doing something in collaboration with a pretty big firm in the analytics space. Hopefully something will come out soon, so stay tuned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.